Hello, I'm Graham and I hope everyone's having a great day. Welcome to the final part in this video tutorial series I've been running for new users to the Panasonic Lumix FZ80 or 82 bridge camera. Now in this particular video I want to look at shooting with flash with the camera. And we're going to look at it from a variety of perspectives, from either the pop-up flash being used as a sole light source to using that as a commander to control other optical systems, and then we'll look at some wireless systems which enable us to use a multi-flash setup. Let's look at first of all the pop-up flash. Now if you are going to use the pop-up flash and you have fitted a lens hood, which I've made recommendation to in previous videos, it's best to remove that lens hood. Otherwise, when you use that pop-up flash and using a wide angle setting, you'll notice that you're getting some shading on the lower portion of your images. So remove lens hoods if you've got one fitted whilst using flash. Now to pop up the flash, you've got a button here on the top left hand side of your camera, and just press that and that releases the Cobra pop-up head. Now the internal flash is fairly weak and has an operational range of about 3 to 5 meters. And with all these pop-up flashes you have the problem of creating sharp shadows behind your subject. It's very flat, unflattering light, and is not really good for portraiture, but in some situations it's the only light source you'll have to be able to capture an image, so it's better than having no light at all. So it is a useful feature in some situations. Now to use the pop-up flash with this camera, there are a couple of caveats you should be aware of. First of all, if you're in the silent mode or you've got the electronic shutter set, you won't be able to use the flash. So you need to be in the auto or manual shutter position first of all. To set up the internal flash, if you go to the record setup menu and on page 5 of 7, halfway down that menu there, you will see the flash setup. When you press menu set, it takes you into the first page of the flash menu. And the first option to look at is the firing mode. Now the firing mode can be set between TTL, which is through the lens metering, and in that mode the camera will fire a pre-flash, measure the amount of light coming back from the subject using the sensor, and then it will use that to create the final exposure using the main flash. So it's a useful method if you're new to flash and not used to setting up the manual method. The TTL control will give you pretty good results. If you wanted to have full control of your flash and you may want to use it in a multi-flash setup, then the manual mode is probably a better way to set up the flash. But we'll talk about that when we're talking about multiple flash units. So we'll leave this set first of all to the TTL mode. Now the second option down is the flash mode. When you open that menu up, you should have the 4 options. If you're only seeing the first 2, it means that you're in probably manual or shutter priority mode. You only get the option to use the slow synchronization or the slow speed synchronization with red eye reduction when you're in the aperture priority or programmed auto mode. So for this particular exercise we'll be in the A mode or the P mode. You can see there we've got the lightning symbol, which is just a full flash. The next one down is the red eye reduction, so the flash will fire a longer burst of light to allow your eyes to respond to that bright light, close down the iris so you're not seeing the blood vessels in the back of the eye, so that you don't see this red eye in your pictures. The next option is a useful one if you're shooting in low light or at night time and you want to have some of the ambient light take place in your picture. Here in this photograph for some mushrooms, I've used the slow speed synchronization to allow me to capture ambient light plus the flashlight from the camera to light up the mushrooms. Now beware that you could be using very long shutter speeds in this mode, so you either use a beanbag like I was if I was going to be shooting the mushrooms, or you must have the camera on a tripod if you're going to be using it for long shutter speeds. But it is a useful method for getting ambient light into your flash picture. And the final option there is the software reduction of red eye, so it looks into your image and if it sees red eye it will then change that to grey using the processing facility within the camera. So for this instance we're going to select the top option, which is just the direct flash. The next option is flash synchronization, and it can be the first or second curtain. Normally we would use first curtain, but there are some situations where you might want to use second curtain to give you some creative effects. Now all this will be explained in the downloadable ebook I've produced with this series. Once I've updated the flash section, there'll be more information on all these settings that you can read at your own leisure. And I'm going to put a link to the download for that particular ebook in the video description of this video. Now with the TTL control, you've got flash adjustment power of plus or minus 2 EV or 2 f-stops. So if you're finding that the flash is underpowered with your TTL because of the way it's monitoring your subject, if you want to boost the flash power, use the plus EV, or if the flash is being fooled and it's overexposing, you can actually use the minus EV to reduce the flash power. On the second page, the main one to look at there is the wireless on or off. Now the wireless on or off gives you access to control a range of Panasonic compatible flash units which communicate using an optical method rather than a radio method. So they have to be Panasonic specific flash units. One that I've got in here is the Nissan i40, which is TTL controllable via the optical flash system, and that's a reasonable price gun and does give you TTL on camera and off camera facility. When we talk about wireless, we're talking about optical triggering and not radio triggering, as we'll be using with the Godox series, which are a radio triggered system and don't have the problems associated with optical triggering, such as not being able to use it in bright sunlight. We'll talk more about the wireless triggering when we look at external flash. So coming back to the first menu, we're in TTL. So if I fire now, hopefully within the video, if the interlacing or the frame rate allows you to see it, you should see a brief burst followed by a full burst of light to capture this image. So if I just zoom the lens back a little bit, now I'll take the picture. If you just notice there was a brief pulse followed by the main pulse to eliminate the subject. So that is how you'd use the pop-up flash. Now in some situations you can use, say, a handkerchief over the face of that flash just to give you a little bit of softening, or you can buy some pop-up clip-on diffusers which will fit in front of the flash head to give you softening effects, so you're not getting such as intense hard edge shadows. Ideal for close-ups. If you put one of those diffusers in front, it reduces the flash power a little bit and gives you a larger surface area to give you that softer image for your close-up flash pictures. Now let's look at using a on-camera flash, and that is just to give you extra power if you wanted to use it over extended distances, or you wanted to use it to bounce the flash from a ceiling or from a white wall to give you better modeling on your subject. So again, I'm going to use the i40 as a demonstration piece here, and again it just slides into the hot shoe and will slide all the way and until it clicks. And then when I turn on the power and I set the gun itself to TTL, the camera will then control this flash unit just as it would its own internal flash. So again, if I take that picture, you'll notice there's a pre-flash on this unit followed by the final flash to give me the correct exposure. So you might be able to see there a brief pre-flash followed by the main flash. Now again, you can control the exposure of the flash either directly from the back of the unit or from the flash exposure compensation within the camera menu. This particular unit is useful in the fact that you can actually use it in a manual mode as well, so you can control the power from full power down to 1/256th of a power. And you can also use it as an automatic flash gun, the same as you used to use with film cameras. You can actually set this to the automatic mode and it will monitor the amount of light for the particular exposure. It's also got a built-in video light if you wanted to use this for video. It's a low power light but useful in some situations. So that's how we'd use the flash unit mounted on the hot shoe to give you extra power. If you wanted to use this in its bounce mode, then you can actually tilt the head up vertically, and if you wanted a card to put a little bit of white catch light in your subject's eyes, if you just slide up that card, a little bit of the illumination comes from this card and it's seen reflected in the pupil of your subject, so it gives you a little bit of extra highlight or catch light in your subject's eyes. but the purpose is to bounce it off the ceiling, or you can actually bounce it from a wall if you've got a white wall to give you that extra bit of modeling rather than the direct flash. So again, if you're going to bounce it off the ceiling, the camera will again calculate the exposure and give you the correct exposure based on the light coming back to the sensor. So this particular flash has got the optical triggering built into it. If I just take that and clip the flash onto this stand, if I set that to the wireless mode, so I'm going to select group A. So on the back of the flash unit, you've got a control wheel here. You set it into the red section, which is the optical triggered, and I'm going to set it to group A. With the camera, we now go into that flash setup menu, and again on page 2 we got the wireless mode. So we're going to turn that from off to on, and then we're going to look at the wireless channel. Now the wireless channel can be set to either one of 4, so you've got channel 1, 2, 3 or 4. Normally you leave it set onto channel 1 unless you're having interference from other channels, other people using flashes in the same environment, but most likely you'll leave it on channel 1. On the third page of that menu, you'll see we've got communication light, high, standard or low. If you're using the flash outside, you're probably going to be needing to use the high mode because it's got to overcome the ambient light. If you're working in a studio or in your room, then standard or low is probably sufficient. Or you could leave it on high if you wanted to. Now in the wireless setup, when you access that mode, it will ask you, do you want to use the pop-up flash as part of the exposure? Now obviously the flash has to be up to enable this system to work, but you can have this to be just the commander, or it can be part of your exposure. So you could have this as a fill light, and also it will communicate the correct exposure parameters to any slave unit. So in this particular case, I'm going to have the built-in flash as TTL as well, and I'm going to have the group A flash, which this unit is on, as TTL as well. So now notice when I press the shutter, we will get a pre-burst from the main flash on the camera, which determines the exposure, will set the level of flash for both the internal and the external flash unit. So you should see a flash from both of these units. So that's how you would set up using the optical wireless trigger of the Panasonic system. Now if you wanted to use the flash gun off camera, you can use an extension cord. Now I've got on here, and it's a Canon extension cord. It's the same pin compatibility as the Panasonic one. It's a 4-wire system, so you'll find it easier to get hold of the Canon one than you will one which is Panasonic compliant. So a Canon TTL cable will do the job. So the one end will slide into the hot shoe of your camera, and then just lock that down. And the other one, your flash gun, will fit into the hot shoe of the extension cord. So lock that down in place. We're going to set this back to TTL because we want the camera to control the exposure. So with the flash on the extension cable, it means I can hold this at 45 degrees to my subject and 45 degrees above it, and that gives me a little bit of extra modeling. The flash will again fire a pre-flash and then the main flash to control the exposure. Now with the Panasonic bridge cameras, it's between the lens shutter, so we're synchronized all the way across the whole shutter range. So I can actually set a shutter speed of a 2,000th of a second if I wanted to, and it will still fire and be in synchronization with the actual image. With focal plane shutters, you may find in some CSCs or DSLRs, then you may be limited to a 250th or a 320th at the max shutter speed. So this gives you an advantage. You can actually use it in daylight and use it for filling flash or to balance with flash and daylight. So it does give you an advantage that you've got a synchronization speed across the whole of the flash range. So that is using the flash on a extension cable to enable you to get better modeling. But maybe you don't want the inconvenience of having the dangling cable, which could be across the lens, or you could trip over it. it's better to use a radio control system, and that's what we'll talk about next. Now, my go-to flash at the moment for Panasonic cameras is the actual Godox TT350O range. Now, you need to buy the camera specific flash unit, so the O designates that it's Olympus or Panasonic, but you can get N for Nikon, S for Sony, there is C for Canon, so there is a range of compatible flash units for different manufacturers' cameras. But the beauty is, once you've bought one unit, that can act as a master to control any other flash unit. So for example, here I've got the Nikon unit, which means that I can actually control this unit from the TTO Panasonic unit, because the two speak a common language between the interfaces. So if you like, we're talking a Olympus Panasonic protocol between the hot shoe and the flash, but we're talking a Godox protocol between the two units. So it doesn't really matter whether it's a Nikon, Canon or Sony flash unit, it will still communicate the correct information that the camera wants to make the exposure with the flash unit. So if you've got a TT350O unit, you can actually slide this onto the camera and use it as a regular pop-up flash. So with the flash mounted on the camera, it's just the same as mounting the Nissan i40. You've got complete TTL control of the unit. So if I turn this on, you've got the option to use it in the manual mode or the TTL mode or multi-stroboscopic mode. So we're going to set this up to the TTL mode. So in the TTL mode, it's just the same as before. The camera fires a pre-flash to determine the exposure and then a main flash to set the exposure. So you could probably see there in the picture, we had the pre-flash followed by the main flash. And again, with this unit, you can bounce or swivel to give you some extra modeling. And again, you've got a wide angle diffuser if you wanted to make this wide. And if you're using it as a bounce mode, you've got a catch light reflector there, just the same as we had with the Nissan unit. But the beauty of this is that we can actually use it to control another flash unit. This will then communicate wirelessly using a radio system rather than an optical system. So you can use it indoors, you can use it outdoors in bright sunlight, and the system still works without interference from infrared or such like interference that you'll get using it outdoors. So you need to set the unit up as a master on the camera, and the unit that you want to control would be set up as a slave. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole process. I've actually produced a separate video on the Godox system, and you can see how to control the external flash units, even some of the bigger flash units that Godox produce, the AD200 or the AD600, all will communicate wirelessly from the same unit. If you wanted to use it 5 groups or more, then you need to be using one of the Godox triggers. Again, they need to be matched to your principal camera. So here, the Panasonic, you'd use the O system, which is Olympus Panasonic. You've got the X1T or the X Pro. The X1T is a little bit more difficult to use. You've only got a single line display, where the X1 Pro, you've got a screen here. You can actually set your 5 channels if you wanted to very, very easily from push buttons on the unit. So this one's about twice the price of the X1T, but if you are going to be using it for a lot of flash, it's worth the extra frustration element to take that away using the X1 Pro. So again, that would just slip on the camera in place of the flash unit, and you'll be able to control your flash units again using the wireless system rather than an optical system. There is another method of controlling your flash units, as we alluded to, and that is using the manual mode of the camera. And then you can use any manufacturer's flash gun that supports the S1 or S2 protocol. S1 would mean that it would fire in synchronization with the pulse coming from the main flash. S2 means that it would wait for the pre-flash to finish and then would fire on the main flash. So it would be better to set your camera up in the manual mode, so you're only going to get the one flash, and then set up your slave in the S1 mode, and again then you could vary the exposure by using your control panel on your external flash unit to set the desired exposure that you need. Again, all that will be covered in that downloadable manual that you can get from my photographic blog site, and again a link to that will be in the video description below. So there we are, that's how to use flash with this camera. I've also produced another video for flash in the Panasonic range of cameras, and I'll put a link to that in the video description as well. It does flesh out on some of the issues we've covered in today's video. So that's it for this series. I hope you found some elements of it useful and you are now producing some better pictures with your Panasonic Lumix FZ80 or 82 camera. Do check out my photographic blog, and on the home page is the application to join that fortnightly newsletter of mine. It's more than a newsletter, it's also a technical publication covering bridge cameras, CSCs and DSLRs from various manufacturers. So do check that out. Thanks again for watching, thanks for your patience, and I hope to see you all in later videos. Goodbye for now.